Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Tough Talking Thursday. My name is Dennis Jah on Focus on Liberia, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In tonight's edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be looking at ways to move Liberia forward, and one of those ways is through education. So we're going to be focusing on education tonight. Invite your friend and share the show, and let's get started. With me to discuss this very important topic is our public policy analyst, Mrs. Carl Famule. Carl, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Also joining us, who is currently teaching, in fact, he's just from school, Mr. Kehleboe Gongloe. Mr. Gongloe, welcome to Focus on Liberia as we discuss education.
Thank you. Thank you. A pleasure.
Thank you. Also joining us is FOL Chief Political Analyst, Mr. Wilmot Kunney. Mr. Kunney, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. Happy to be here.
Last but not the least is alumni of Wablo Institute from Kehleboe, who is joining us from Philadelphia. He is FOL Political Analyst, Mr. Mohamed Sherif. Comrade Sherif, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thanks for having me, Dennis.
We want to welcome all viewers from across the globe. This is Focus on Liberia, and we're going to be discussing education. And so to start, to get this moving, I will just go around the room. Tell me, we are not in Liberia. We have people that we also visit. Let me get your general feel of education in Liberia. What you think of it, what you know about it. Just in 2 minutes as your intro, just a little bit of overview of what you know of education in Liberia. Let me start with Mr. Kehleboe Gongloe. Mr. Gongloe, you are very close to education. How is education in Liberia?
Well, Dennis, thank you. I think, in my view, I think we should look at education in the context of the 21st century, because there is a temptation that Liberians usually quickly fall for, that they take probably just a handful of students who perform well outside Liberia. When they leave, they say, oh, our education system is strong. But let's look at how the entire country, from Cape Palmas to Cape Mount, from Manimba to Cape Moserado. Let's look at education in that context. What is education today in the 21st century in Liberia? You come to think of a school building with no electricity, no computer lab, both are elementary, junior high, senior high, and colleges. You don't have access to technology. I'm looking at statistics that show that even in public schools, there are more untrained teachers without certification in classroom teaching. It will show to you that private faith-based education, community-based education combined together, they provide more education facility to Liberian children than the government. And let me just make this caveat. When we talk about government, I'm not just talking about the CDC, we are government. I'm talking about Liberian government historically has actually disengaged and abandoned education, and basically relinquish our responsibility to faith-based institution, private so education is like a private commodity today in Liberia, historically. That it is that context, I think, I would like for us to probably shift our discussion tonight, so that we don't have somebody to adopt a partisan position like we're probably trying to get our CDC government.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kunney, your opening statement on education, and you can also include what we are discussing, moving the country forward. We pick education. So in your overview, also tell me, why is education important in moving the country forward?
Well, really, I like the first speaker, my brother Kehleboe, who just spoke, because as I've always said on this platform, there are certain issues that should not be nonpartisan. And I think the issue of education is one of them. We can all agree here that our education system is in trouble, serious trouble. And like you rightfully said, not only from this government, but from previous government. We all have our experiences with education throughout the years. And sometimes there is a tendency when people talk about education to only focus on education in Monrovia, but we're talking about the rural counties. We're talking about the regions of the country. And, I've shared my story here, and sometimes people laugh. I mean, my own story of how I went to school is very instructive. And to a large extent, almost 40 years ago, that pattern has not changed much. A situation where you have maybe one school in an entire jurisdiction, and that one school don't even have enough teachers, or even if they have teachers, the teachers are not qualified teachers. That's something that happened in 1970 when I was in school, when I started school, and that's something that's still happening throughout Liberia up to this point. So education is really a problem. It's a challenge for the country. And if you ask me, going forward, maybe there are two areas I think maybe we need to focus. We need to focus on technical education, vocational education, because even some of the people that are going to college now, they're not even college materials. But they go into college, you see the mushrooming of universities around Liberia, different kind of universities.
Yeah.
And so this is a problem. I mean, if you read the history of some nations that come from war, after war, where there is that huge gap between that huge gap in learning, like in our case, you're talking about 14, 15 years gap. One of the things you prioritize is technical and vocational education, because the people that didn't go to school 14 years ago, you're not going to go put them in a classroom for them to do academic work. That's not going to work. And I think we missed that mark. So our education, the education system in the country continue to be a problem. Like you said, we will find one or two shiny apples here and there, but that's it. In terms of a holistic approach to education in our country, that is a challenge for Liberia. That has been a challenge for Liberia. And if you say going forward, I will add technical education, vocational education. I will even add an adult literacy program. These were things that worked before, adult literacy. We don't have adult literacy program anymore. I don't know whether it's still at the Ministry of Education, but we don't hear those things. These were things that used to help, back then. So I think we, total mess. I think the mess Madam Sherif talked about, I think it's still continuing. I don't think we've put a dent into it. We can make identification of one or two things we have done, but on the average, Dennis, don't take my word for it. I mean, ask a Liberian college graduate to write you a paragraph, and then you will see what we're talking about as the art school students. You speak to some students in Liberia that can make the distinction between a quote, the code where people can wear, and the code where people can go to adjudicate cases. They can make that distinction. Simple distinction like that. They can make the distinction between the beta ball we can eat and the ball that we can play. They spell all of them the same way. So these are things that all you find all around us, no matter where the person go to school at. So that's a problem. And I'm hoping that, like the brother said, certain things we have to discuss as Liberians, because the impact, affect all of us. It's not a partisan issue for me. I don't see it that way.
Thank you. Carl, what is education and how is it different from school? That is on top of the original question I asked before.
Absolutely. So education is basically the process of leading the systematic process, institutionalized and systematic process of leading one out of ignorance. So the process of education is to lead yourself out of ignorance. In the context of the state, of the government, of a country, the process of education is to acculturate, to create national identity, to create problem solvers, to create competent citizens that will advance the cause of the state, to move the country forward. So all countries are focused on this. They do this by making sure that the country can be self-sufficient, independent. They diversify the subject matter so that every aspect of being a nation can be resolved by the citizens within it, so that you don't have to depend on outsiders to solve your problems. Even the United States has a shortage of technical, people. So what they did was they boosted up the technical education from the early education levels, when preschool kids are starting to learn coding and all of these things, so that they don't have to continue to do this brain drain from Asia to fill that gap. So it is an ongoing process. The most important thing, I'm actually going to quote Carter G. Woodson, who wrote this masterful book over 100 years ago that everyone should read. It's called The Miseducation of the Negro. He said, if you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what that man will do. And what we've done in Liberia, because of poverty, we didn't have a slave state to exploit like other countries did, right? We didn't have resources. We didn't conquer another land to suck their resources to make ourselves rich. So we were relying on our own strength, and then we were relying on faith. So the education system in Liberia is threefold. You have the traditional schools that are ancient, which are there for the exact same purpose, to acculturate and to lead people out of ignorance. You've got the Islamic schools, which would be the next oldest form of education on the Grain Coast. And the same thing, acculturate, teach the religion, teach the spirituality, lead people out of ignorance. And then you've got the last, which is the Western education, which came through also faith-based education, missionaries. Public education, when Liberia was created, did not exist in the United States. So they didn't have a system of public education to copy or borrow. Schools in the United States were private in 1822. Public education is a more recent phenomenon. So they were mimicking what the churches were doing, basically. And they were using missionaries were the primary teachers in most of the world of Western education. So that was mimicked in Liberia. Unfortunately, even though we had a lot of African missionaries, we also had this ideology of, European or Western, or what we call white supremacy. And so there's this downgrading of ourselves. So the lowering and the breaking of the self-esteem of the people of Liberia was done through the education system. And to this day, 2022, we have not gone back to revise or create or develop curriculum that not only prepares people to do all the things we need to do to be a complete country, but to build the self-esteem of the citizens and teach them that they're citizens and make them have the type of dignity that they need in order to move the country forward. So the education system has failed in all aspects. That it should be, all of its purposes have failed. So not only is it not, we're not even teaching people competently, but the exact purpose of education has been lost. And people think it's literacy. Literacy is one component, right? You become literate so that you can learn more. The goal isn't literacy. The goal is to get out of ignorance. Being able to read alone is not the goal of education. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but so we really have to understand that. And when we're talking about advancing Liberia and advancing our education system, we have to go back to the nitty-gritty, start to acculturate children. In the United States, they start that process at about 3 years old in preschool. Teaching them from preschool who they are, what America is, and how important they are to the process of developing the country. My youngest is 4 years old. She sees herself as a problem solver, a world changer. They do that to everyone. Not only because I do it at home, the school system tells them that they're able to do things and change the world. So this is important. We're missing so many things. It's not just about competence, technical competence. Of course, we need that. But technical competence without all the things I'm talking about is just a recipe for brain drain anyway. They'll just leave because they'll have no bounden duty to their country.
Thank you, Carl. And we're going to go more into that. Let me go to Mohamed. And Mohamed, we are talking about moving the country forward. We're looking at education. What is the importance of education in moving Liberia forward? And how are we doing so far?
Not good. So it is very important. Education is. But before I get into my 2 minutes. You allotted me, Dennis. Let me just take this time to correct myself from our previous program, because when you are talking sometimes on the show, sometimes as your mind, you talk faster than your mind can think sometimes. So
Yeah.
I did mention that the loan in the October era, I think I said 800 million. It's between 700 to 800.
Okay.
And the experts that came in 1988 worked in Liberia for about a year, not quite a year. Somewhere in my expose, I mentioned that, I stated inadvertently that, they left after a month. No, they were there for, I think, about 9 months. They arrived around May of 1988, and they left around February of 1989. They were fed up. They knew there was no way out. So I just want to correct myself there.
Yeah,
For
it
that.
was big on the 17 experts those days.
So in terms of that debt during that era on the toll board, that was a good debt. We're not talking about debt tonight, but I want to mention again, that was a good debt, because one of the things that happened at that time was that there was a loan from the World Bank. So the World Bank financed the building of schools. For example, the Zouadou Multilateral High School was built from a loan from the World Bank.
Right.
The Harbor Multilateral High School, the Vonjama Multilateral High School. These high schools were built from loans provided by the World Bank. So this, to me, Dennis, is good debt. So Mr. Tobo understands the need for education. He was an advocate for quality education. So not only that the leader that he was, not only that it was his policy to promote education, he took upon himself to talk to communities like my community. As I mentioned, my father told us that it was the president that encouraged them to send their kids to school. And me and my brother, peace be, my brother, Abu passed now, peace be unto him. We were beneficiaries of that because of the fact that the president made it a priority and went around to communities to educate their sons and daughters. Communities that were reluctant to send their children to school. Communities like mine that were reluctant at the time. So this is what's going to one of the things that's going to be required is we have to have the leadership, not only talking about education. The leadership has to be very serious about education. Gongloe mentioned the other time that in 40 years there has been no high school built. I believe he said Monrovia, or it must be Liberia.
Public high school.
MCSS school system, which is the
MCSS.
largest public high school.
There's no public, yeah.
So there's no public high school. That is a problem. So 40 years ago, what was the population of Liberia? Probably was not even 2 million. So you have now, if you believe, our latest, population, the result of our survey, which says, we are around 5 million. If you believe that, then what is the reason why we're still living in the 1970s or the 1980s, for example? That has been short-sighted because the investment that's been made, the debt that this government accrues, they are taking on debt to service payroll, to pay themselves. They're not taking debt to support education. So you don't have an investment in building the schools and updating the curriculum, which is, some of which are antiquated. So if you have a situation where Liberia is living in the past in terms of education. So there's no priority on education. Wilmot Kunney, Mr. Kunney mentioned that, you have a university student, you ask a university student to write a letter in Liberia, and they probably can't write a letter. You don't need to look any further. Look at the mayor of Monrovia, who just graduated from an alma mater, the University of Liberia. For God's sake, this man has trouble communicating, conveying his thoughts in clear, short sentences. So, and it is stated that he is, I guess he has graduated from what I heard. So that is not a good outlook for Lux in Tenebris itself. It's not a good outlook. You have your alumni out here who is not able to express himself. So how did he go through that school? So he is just an example of the many graduates from the institution now. So we are in trouble. So anytime you have a situation like that, if the national leaders are not able to get their ass together, then of course the nation, I believe, is on the wrong track. So there are several issues that we can talk about tonight, from curriculum to infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure antiquated, dilapidated. You have a decrepit infrastructure, a decrepit curriculum, that have never been changed in the last 40 to 50 years. That is a recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
Thank you. Quite recently, on the birthday of President Joseph Jenkins Roberts, there was an op-ed from the American ambassador who said, "What would J.J. Roberts say about us today?" So, Kehleboe, let me put, and this has become a talking point in our community.
Can I just say something really quick? Before we lose Mohamed's thought, he wanted to know the population of Liberia 40 years ago was 1.9 million, and today it's 5.0 something. It's almost 5.1 million.
Wow, thank you.
The estimate is 5.1 million.
So, I mean, it's all estimated. We don't do real. We haven't done a census, of course.
No, because what they do is just projection.
Yeah.
So the growth rate.
It's statistical projection because we haven't done an actual. Yeah.
So Mr. Gongloe, again, this is focused on Liberia. We are discussing education has a way of moving the country forward. FOL education analyst Mr. Sizi Goyah, he will join us later. He's scheduled for the show, but he has very pressing engagement, and so he couldn't be here on time. Hopefully, he's going to join us. So, Mr. Gongloe, I'm looking at some payloads in education here. Has Sizi Goyah, education analyst, described them, which is access, quality, accountability, and partnership. By access to schools in your area. If you live in an area, do you have schools there to go to? Even if there are schools, can you afford to attend those schools? Then on quality, let's look at the physical structure. Are they equipped for learning? The staff qualification for professional development, the support for students and staff. Then we look at accountability, leadership training and accountability. Then partnership. Do we have the schools, the homes, and the society partnering? So and I'm going to borrow from the American ambassador, if J.J. Robert look at our education today, what will he say?
Well, generally you can. I think in context, if you reflect on the days of J.J. Roberts, knowing his history, that he was an educator, he was somebody who took interest in education. Aside the politics of who he was, his background, and what have you, aside that politics, the history, we may argue on the positive and negative. But he's somebody who actually, his contribution to the Liberian education system still stands out today. I mean, I benefited from J.J. Roberts Education Foundation for a year. And schools for many other Liberians. I mean, we can say, if we can even ask a question, previous president who came after J.J. Roberts, have they invested in education in some form, even some committing just to science or engineering, scholarship for students, even to the arts, just various aspects of education. Have they established foundation and not just amassing wealth from public coffers for they and their family and generation? What would Liberia be like today? Maybe we can flip the question and say, how other presidents followed the J.J. Roberts example to establish foundation dedicated to education. What would Liberia education system be like today? But again, this is a counterfactual. We can't argue because there's no way we can have data to argue that. We can ask this kind of rhetorical question. But if I want to just talk on that, the government has a core function. One of the function of government, among other things, to provide social services. Education is part of the social services government should provide. And if you look across Liberia, that performance from our government, from J.J. Roberts' time to this present day, is dismal, is discouraging. In fact, in rural area like Mr. Kunney talked about earlier, and even in previous discussion, what you see is that communities, people in their desire to provide education for their kids, they go and build school. They call it community school. And then give it to government and say, you can assign teachers here. So if you look in the current education statistics, about 5% of what we call schools in Liberia were built by community people who give the school to government and say, you assign teachers there. But government didn't put in money. Okay? Government didn't put in money. So if you look at it, generally, from J.J. Roberts' time to President Weah time, Liberian government the one that put in the budget and build just 44% of the school buildings in Liberia. 56% of the school buildings are owned by faith-based schools, private schools. In fact, private schools are about 32% of the school structure in Liberia, which is discouraging. You have a country as rich as Liberia with a very small population. So what happens in the system is that because public schools are less expensive and private schools and faith-based schools are expensive, bulk of the enrollment is in public school. It tells you that there is overcrowding in classroom. It also affects the quality of education in public school. And like I said in previous discussion, the NCSA, the Monrovia Consolidated School System, where I taught in Tottenham for a couple of years, actually from 1992 to 1997, that school system, there has been no new addition to MCSA school system for as long as that system was established. What they've done, they've been repairing buildings. You go to G.D. Gibson campus or ask, if I would say we can almost subtract Detroit High School from here now, because Detroit High School has been gradually taken over by the sea erosion. So, and Monrovia is the epicenter of population growth in Liberia.
And Central High is gone.
Central High is gone. So if you look at all of that, where is the Liberian government? Liberian government is missing action in public education, in quality education, in giving access to people. Look at Central Monrovia. Look how many persons live between bypass and capital bypass and Mamba Point. Look at that population and see how many public schools in there. The rest are private schools. So people are constrained to send their kids to private school when they don't have. So if they don't have, that is part of the reason why kids are selling in the streets of Monrovia. Because you don't even have public schools, many public schools to accommodate people sending their kids to kindergarten, to elementary school in Central Monrovia. It's an issue. And we'll talk less about it in Liberia, and we'll talk more about the politics of other things, So for me, if J.J. Roberts were to come today, I think he would be disappointed. He would be asking, I'm the only person who have foundation in the entire nation devoted to education, that I have been giving scholarship to students from Kipamos to Kidman, from Nimba to Monserrato, from Lofa to Basso, am I the only person, the former president, to do this? He will be discouraged. He will be shouting. What happened to the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf that received the highest donation, the higher global standing, that could even just point and say, look, I need this. If I need all girls school, that was something Mrs. Sirleaf could have done. All girls school, because she was the first female president elected. Even though this can be argued, she was not the first female president in Africa, but elected democratically. We can say that she did not even seek to establish all girls public schools, be funded by government budget. She did not do that. So it shows the lack of faith, the lack of commitment to our lead or on the part of our leaders of public education.
Thank you.
And I think there is a reason why they do that, Dennis. There is a reason. The reason is it is an investment in ignorance. And when the people are ignorant, they follow their garbage, they follow their misleading information. That is the reason why generally our leaders do not invest in education, because they want to reap on the investment in literacy.
Thank you. Mr. Kunney, I know there are many issues that we face, our educational system face in Liberia. Many issues. And I listed when it comes to access, quality, accountability, and even partnership, because school is not just the school building. The community, your home, and the society should all come together to educate the child. In your view, what is the major problem our educational system is facing? Because tonight what we want to do is, how can we use education to move forward? So let's first identify the problem. What do you think is some of the major problems our educational or the school system is facing?
Okay, Dennis, before I answer that, really, I would have loved for you to introduce this statement, this discussion, without injecting what the American ambassador said. Because, most time, and like Cisco sometimes say, whenever these people sneeze, we think now then the issue is real. We've brought many educators on this show before. Many Liberian educators have spoken about the issue of our educational system. It didn't alarm anybody. Even the president of our country called the system a mess. Nobody was alarmed. Now a United States ambassador is asking what would J.J. Roberts say, and now it becomes a serious topic of discussion. This is the imperialist-driven mentality here that, sometimes we always talk about. But the serious problem that confront education in Liberia is all of the things we talk about: access, quality, all of these things. Even the institutions that are supposed to be free, if they tell you the requirements that you have to meet, the registration fees and all of these things, in a technical way, it amount to tuition. And it's not something of today, it's something that been going on. So if you talk about the access, it prevents people from going to school, even though you say public education is free. But here's a laundry list of things that students have to do. And even if they get there is another laundry list that they have to comply with to graduate. So the access is a challenge. The quality, really, besides the 2 teacher training institutes we have in Liberia, you have scores of other teachers that are teaching in our classroom that are not certificated. They're not certificated. They don't have the requisite training to be teachers. But some of them are in the classroom because there is no trained teacher available. Again, I go back to my days when I started school. All the people that were teaching, in fact, my first teacher was a Methodist preacher. The man preached on Sunday, then Monday he became a teacher. You see? And these things are still going on. Accountability, who is responsible for some of the things that happen to our students? And there are a lot of things you can point to. Sex for grace. All of these things are happening in our schools. So where is the accountability coming from? So we are short. We are short on all of the variables that you talk about. And we need to be more committed. We need to redouble our effort as a society if we going to stand up to the 21st century. Sometimes the people compare us to Ghana. Look at Ghana. And Ghana was doing this. Ghana used to come to Liberia to come buy soap. But what they failed to realize that when Ghanaians were coming to Liberia to come buy soap, there were Ghanaian teachers in all of our schools. Every Liberian school you went to had a Ghanaian teacher at that time. Yeah, so they came to buy soap, but they were the teachers, whether public school, whether private school. So there is, we have a serious national problem. And so because of this problem, many people are not in school. You see almost everybody in the society is a militant. It's a militant. People singing, people dancing. There is no ability to even analyze issues. We go to vote, we don't vote in people of tested character and integrity because we don't even understand the issues. So we have a serious problem, and where we begin is start with a serious commitment on the part of the national leadership to move us from one point to the other. The slogans will not carry us there. The slogans will not carry us there. We need a comprehensive plan that will help our people, like cause it take people from ignorance. Look, then it's where our children being taught that it is good to stand in line. That standing in line is a virtue, to form a basic line. So as children, we don't form line. As adults, we don't form line. We don't these basic things. All of our educational institutions, they are just driven by the so-called Western style something. Every school is dependent on government funding. Look at our universities. Where are the research are they conducting to solve some national issues? The university no university conduct research. And there are a lot of issues in Liberia that can be researched. For example, I want to know how many cars go over the Great Tucker Bridge on a weekend. That's a useful information. What's the volume of traffic on that bridge on the weekend or versus the weekday?
Yeah, but Mr. Kunney, if I may interject, on behalf of the university professors in Liberia, research by universities don't just occur in a vacuum. Industries are interested in the information and they do support this research. So, for example, the Ministry of Transport may be interested in that, or the police may be interested in controlling traffic and say, okay, they may come to the University of Liberia, maybe the math department or the graduate school or the Institute of Research. The University of Liberia does have that as a research department. They may come and say, look, we are interested in formulating a policy on traffic control. We want to know how many cars are coming from Bushel Island into Central Monrovia between the hours 6 a.m. and 12 noon. We want to know that. Then they can do the research and give a report because they will fund that. So if you look in the university may undertake research. All the professors who have maybe their research, their dissertation, they may try to revisit some of their hypotheses, but it's just for their consumption or maybe publishing in peer review, not necessarily. So yeah, you are right. Research is lacking, but again, LPRC is not even investing in research. All of the government.
So Mr. Gongloe, you're saying they are not researching because nobody asked them.
And that's the point I want to make.
Nobody is funding research.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not a one-way
research.
Gongloe, it's not a one-way street. The university is not going to be sitting there until somebody asks. The university will have to also develop a strategy to market these ideas that people will be interested in. You see? So, we're saying the same thing, but it's just that it is not a one-way street that they will have to wait. I'm just saying these are the merits of problem that face our school system. Everybody sit there they just sit there and wait, and we all go through the same process. And then it go to the other question of the funding thing, because everything we make it about funding. I was looking at doing a little cousin review. The government of Liberia, the last budget, they said they gave education $70 million. $70 million.
Yeah.
Now what they say they gave the government. Yeah. And these entities.
You know the law on primary education?
most of the social services or the service sector in Liberia, in addition to government funding, they also receive international funding. So the question is, I'm saying this thing to talk about accountability. What is the accountability when it comes to the utilization of funds that are being earmarked for these programs? We don't see it. $70 million by government-owned counting, but I want to believe that there is money that also came from other sources for education other than government. So how are we managing these funds? How are we prioritizing the promotion of education using these funds? It goes to the same thing as the healthcare sector that we're talking about. There is government funding, there is donor assistance, but yet and still, healthcare is also poor in our country. All of these things are poor. So we're talking about accountability here. How are we using the dollars that we put behind these things? You spend $70 million on education, but guess what? The bulk of that money goes to salary.
Yeah.
It goes to salary.
If I may interject here.
Yeah. Thank you, Kehleboe. I want to, and you will come in. Let me go to call, because we are talking about all these issues, and Mr. Kunney outlined some of them. What do you think is the root cause? Because it's always good to start from the very basic.
Yeah, I think I already broke down what the root cause was, but when it comes to grants and funding for research, that's usually privately funded. Countries can also give money, governments can give money, but in circumstances like Liberia's, where we don't have a really strong tax base, other than we focus mostly on the extractive industry, but graduates, alumni associations usually receive resources from their alumni. University of Liberia, almost every educated person from Liberia has graduated from there. How much do they give back to the school? And there's so much, emphasis on government, but the reason these people went to school is so that they themselves could reach back. I mean, in a developed country like the United States, I belong to 2 alumni associations. You have to be able to be part of the community of education, the community of the school that produced you. You see people posting, oh, University of Liberia is dilapidated. People who graduated from there that are making decent money, they feel no obligation or no responsibility to the school. And, so we have to also talk about the responsibility of citizens and communities. We're in a very desperate situation. America did not always have public schools. America did not always have free public education, but people were educated at the highest level, because what did they do? The churches, Monday through Friday, the churches were schools. The churches gave free education to their constituents. The membership, the members. And what did they do? They opened the schools. Members of the church, parishioners, taught basic literacy. Even enslaved people, when they were emancipated, learned in that manner. People in the West, as America expanded and the government didn't reach that far, it was through a process of lobbying that education became public. But before that, citizens have to take responsibility too. We don't pay a lot of taxes in Liberia. With the budget of Liberia is less than the high school my son attends. I want you to think about that. This is one high school in one county, in one state in the United States. Google the annual budget for Beaufort High School, and then look at what the Liberia budget is. I'm bringing all of this up to say that you have very little resources. And even if it was, it's frustrating that it's not managed correctly and that people are ignorant and do a lot of silly things and they don't know their jobs, and we could go on and on. I agree. That is also true. Ineptitude, corruption, all of those things are true. And if they were not as inept, they would know how to raise resources. But because they're inept, they don't have the resources they need to do their jobs. There is not enough money in the budget to raise the University of Liberia to the level it needs to be. If we even took all of the resources away from the legislature, we're not going to pay you, it's a voluntary job, and took all of that money, because the bulk of the money goes to them, and put it into the university, it would not be enough to bring it up to world-class standards. That's a fact. So the situation is dire. We need to make some drastic and really innovative changes, and we need to do it within reason, with a larger goal in front. What can we do today Today, you have technology, you have Zoom, you have smartphones in everyone's hands. You have access to these people. I do a seminar in Liberia 2 days a week. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I go on Zoom and I do the seminar. I do it for free. I volunteer because that's what I want to do. A lot of people around the world could be asked to contribute in some way just to impact information upon people.
Cole, let me, if I may interject, ask you a question. Are you saying the issue is money, the funding?
I'm saying that's one factor. There's many factors. That's a factor that I'm mentioning that hasn't been mentioned because others have mentioned other factors, which I agree with. So when we're looking at a problem, there's many factors that go into solving a problem, right? You have to look at all the factors in order for you to solve the equation. So Mr. Gongloe gave a factor, Mr. Sherif gave a factor, Mr. Kunney gave a factor. I'm giving another one. Okay. Because you cannot solve the equation without looking at all the contributing factors. And funding is one of them. So because of lack of funding, we have to come up with alternative ways to get us to where we need to be. Schools, during the Sherif administration, a lot of people were sent away on scholarship. There was the massive Fendel campus was constructed. There was a lot of resources put into the JFK nursing school, into the school in what do you call it? The nursing school in FITB. All of the schools in Liberia, including the private schools, receive some money from government. And that was strange to me when I was there. So even like Ganta Methodist, all these private schools, they receive funding from government. Sure. And they're still charging tuition. And it's still substandard. And teachers, I remember when the education minister wanted to give an exam to teachers and they started to riot because they knew they were going to fail.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
They knew they were going to fail. This was a basic competency exam. And it was to assess, he was one of the worst education ministers in history, but that's beside the point, in my opinion. But that's beside the point. The reason he wanted to give the test is because they wanted to assess where they were to see how they needed to build their capacity. And instead of them, giving themselves to take the test so they could better themselves, they rioted because they were trying to mask the shame of their inability to do their job. And that is sad. People would rather pretend to know things than to actually know things. People would rather pretend to graduate and obtain degrees than to actually do it.
If I may just interject there, I'm aware of that issue. And being an old teacher myself in Liberia, I think the issue the teachers raised was not a question of masking their incompetence. It was more that it's like you are aware of me not having certification. You are aware of me not having these things. You asked me to come because there was no school, there was no teacher. Say, go there and teach. So you already know why test me? Take me and send me to training school. Send me to in-service training school. That was the argument.
Yeah, I remember that argument. I remember that argument.
I'm already not qualified, and I know this.
No, Mr. Gongloe, that's not how it works. Mr. Gongloe, that's not how it works. And as educators, they should be the first.
That was the argument. I was not.
Yeah, I understand that's their argument, but that's not how it works. You have to assess someone to know how to correct the situation. If you don't do an assessment, you don't know how to train someone. And you know that as an educator. The reason you test is so you can know where people are. So if you're an educator, I still have the floor, sir. If you're an educator and you want to assess people, they're teachers. How do they know what their students need to focus on if they don't test them? If you don't test your students, if you don't assess their ability, how do you know how to design your coursework to build and strengthen the areas where they're weak? So to say, my deficiency, just teach me, is absolutely ridiculous, with no offense intended. But you have to assess someone to know what their deficiencies are so you can structure a curriculum to build that deficiency. So if you just want people to be blindly trained, I think that's inappropriate. That's not how education works.
Thank you. Mr. Gongloe, you wanted to interject something before that. So do that quickly before I go to Mr.
No,
Sherif.
the point I just want to make is, you see, the education ministry, there's a deficiency there. In education, like in this country, in the United States, like tomorrow, we're not having school tomorrow. It's Child Development Day. So we are going to be in training. You are required. Okay. Just about a few weeks ago, we were in another Child Development training. So, you are required to do this continuing education training, okay, in order to maintain your job. That is lacking in Liberia. We have not tried that approach where you can even take high school graduate, even in Ghana, other African countries, to do this national service or contract with high school students, high school graduates who want to provide services to their country. And for 2 years, after that, they can go back, they can go to university, and the government of Ghana will pay. They don't have to pay for that college education again. So Liberia could even try all of these and be a medium through which they recruit teachers and train them. But we're not trying that. I'm not saying educators should mask their incompetence by not being tested, but the other side, government is not even providing them the avenue to even do in-service training. My father was a teacher. He one of those who started school because there was no teacher in the entire district. They said, go there. In 1964, they said, go and start school before Nema became a county. He was working at Ganta Methodist Hospital as a nurse aide, okay? And he went, after like how many years? In 1980s, I remember I was in 10th grade, 1984. They said, oh, you have to go back to school. They put them in service training. Every vacation period, they will take them to Coddington for 2 months. They are there, all folks, training them that otherwise, if you don't do this training, we'll retire you. And they have to be trained. If I was teaching in algebra, I remember composite numbers. He said when you were going to school, this other system was not algebra, I said, okay, I will teach you. I'm learning that in school. We'll make fun about that. So I think government needs to do those kind of stuff. I mean, I'm looking at the statistic before me, the number of teachers that are not trained in public school in Liberia is alarming.
Yeah, there should be ongoing education, absolutely. But they have to be assessed to know where to strengthen people. The assessment's necessary.
In fact, government can even throw them out of the system because it'll be a disaster. You have schools of all.
I don't think that's the goal. I think any responsible government has to do an assessment and see where people are and know what the deficiencies are in order to correct them.
Mr. Sherif, where do we start from when it comes to solving these problems?
Yeah, just that last topic that Paul and Comrade Gongloe were talking about.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you have to do an assessment. Where will you have to make an assessment to be able to train the individual, to be able to train the teacher in this case. Dennis, so before, the demise of the Tolbert administration. So in Waplo Institute, right? So there were kids from nearby towns, nearby villages, I should say, that came to our town, came to our school, our elementary school. So they will have to walk from their village, and they will have to cross 2 large creeks, water, right? And so they will have to disrobe, get through this water and come to school. This was a daily occurrence for these young people at the time. And so all these years later, decades later, those same conditions persist. What that tells me is the lack of effort, the lack of will to do anything about education. Second, it's all about greed. The government, our officials are greedy. Third, inefficiency. They're inefficient. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what to do. So you have a large number of teachers on payroll, teachers that don't exist, right? Ghosts. They call them ghosts. Ghost names. They're ghost names on these payrolls. And so these ghost names
I think that's been corrected a long time
are
ago.
hurting the economy. They are hurting the education system. I remember the former minister of finance. There was a news report out of Monrovia when Minister Kunney tried to do something about it. And there was a lot of talk about, why was he doing this? One of the people who over here in the United States that wrote about this was Yeyia, whom you constantly invite on this platform. He said that, this is not Guinea. America has to go and do that in Guinea. This is someone
Oh my
who
God.
is supposed to be an educated person who claims to be a lawyer. I mean, look, I have stopped being shocked. So this person has this person disposition to me just crossed the realm of everything that I was thinking that day. So how can a so-called educated person think ignorant like that? So just imagine if you have someone like that as your minister of education, what will you have in Liberia? You're not going to have any progress. So what I'm saying here is that there are a lot of JWETs in the Liberian education system, in Liberian education leadership, unfortunately, that don't have the vision, that don't have the will. They are greedy. They don't care. So people have to care. I am a product of the Liberian public and private education system. So I understand both systems. And I understand the need, the dire need to do something. Do something. It has to be done now. Because, Dennis, I see education as something that can bring us closer together. I believe, right? The more educated this society is, the better it is overall. People don't even know their rights. So because of the lack of knowledge, because of the lack of education, you have us collectively as Liberians, making decisions that we're not supposed to be making. What are we talking about here every day? We're talking about, or why did the people vote this way? Or why did they make this decision? It's because the people are mostly uninformed and they don't know. And for the lack of knowledge, the Liberian people suffer. And there has to be an effort to build an enlightened society. There has to be that effort because you know what? Education is a passport out of poverty for Liberia. That called me an excellent point. I mean, those of us who came out of Luke's and Timbers, we should look back. We should, in our different organizations, you have these University of Liberia, organization in the diaspora.
Right.
We should look back to do something for our alma mater. But again, the problem is, there's always the concern about what government is doing. Is the government serious enough about, uplifting the university, for example? So you can start from primary school all the way to university level. There is no effort to do anything about improving the quality of education in Liberia. I haven't seen one. I haven't seen an education champion. Maybe the Ellen government, maybe they made some effort, I think, but I haven't seen a champion since William R. Tolbert in Liberia.
Thank you. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how we fix the issue that we've discussed. But before then, let me bring in Mr. Kunney to respond to these two. Magnus Cassell said, all lip service, no real national commitment to improving education. And we have Kehleboe Flomo said, do you think you are going to have a serious breakthrough in education under the leadership of a president who tells his followers, if book and English can build a nation, Liberia will be one of the finest nations? Mr. Kunney, sometimes we say leadership, sometimes we say the government, sometimes we don't even hold ourselves accountable. Your response to those two comments?
Well, you see, the issue of education, I think it cut across. Yes, we need national leadership that will champion the cause, but equally so, I mean, we need it's an all hands on deck approach. The society, the parents, and everybody need to get on board. So it's not just the leadership. Yes, the leadership need to play the leadership role to set the agenda, but also individuals, parents, also need to be part of the process. The challenge we have in our country is, that also impact education is the challenges we have in other sectors of society. For example, problems of unemployment. I mean, talking about keeping family together. If you have the child and the parent in the same household, there is, a greater chance of both parent involvement. In our country today, because of the unemployment issue, you find the case pretty much most of the children are raising themselves. They are raising themselves. They have this whole challenge of trying to meet, to carry on life. So yes, leadership is important, but I think it cut across to almost every one of us, because even in situations where the schools are available, the children are not going to school. Children are not going to school. Even in the few instances where the resources are available, people are not studying, people are not learning. So it's a societal problem. And we all have to find a way, really, to find solution to this problem. I don't want to comment on the president's statement. I think the statement is contextual. It was within context, and sometimes people take it out of context. So I don't want to defend that tonight. Basically, the thing is, if education was our problem, I think if you analyze that statement carefully, is that, look, we have so many educated people. The country is not short of educated people. So if that was the problem, then our country would not be having the problem that it's having today. I think that's the context. I don't think it was dismissing education as a vital component of society.
Thank you, Mr. Gongloe.
Yeah, I wanted to make comment on few.
I know, but let me ask this one. You can wrap it in when I ask you a question on. Mr. Kunney made a point that where even schools are available, people don't go. In my own town, we used to eat book, but now all the children are in the gold mine. Most of them are in the gold mine. They don't want to go to school. You travel a lot in the southeastern area there and other places. What in access is there? They have access to education. Sometimes they don't even have to pay, but they don't want to go. What's responsible for that?
Well, I think it's a larger question of rehabilitation after the Civil War. And I think we have to look at it in that context as opposed to just maybe beating on maybe few family or single few group of children. And of course, there are many post-war crises that we're facing, and our leaders are not even seeing that. Even in my own village, the issue of use of narcotics in Liberia is something that is. I mean, I can argue, and I believe the guys from the DA will agree with me. I'm not sure there's any single village in Liberia that someone is not growing marijuana. I can argue that because I've been in many places in Liberia. No single village in Liberia that someone is not making opium farm. Okay? Because things that was not even happening. Those things were not happening in Liberia before. If you're smoking marijuana in the village, everybody will notice you, and they will think that you want to get crazy. Your friends will ostracize you.
Right.
Today, it is a norm. It is acceptable to sit open in video clubs and smoke weed. So there's something, it's a post-war thing that we have to deal with. I was, like I said to you in one of our conversations, I was in Sino. I spent 27 days. I'm not sure how many villages I didn't go in Sino. Traveling, in most cases, walking by foot to find people to interview them in 1999. And I left, Sino was where I have the conviction that I have to leave Liberia to come to the US or anywhere in the world, because I felt that we're preparing for another civil war. In the entire Southeast, the only high school at the time in 1999 was Fatima High School. The entire Sino, there was no high school. You complete 9th grade, you don't go to Grand Bassa, Buchanan, or you come to Monrovia. Otherwise, you start producing children or you start doing something else. And I saw that in 1999, we have had a democratic election on the chancellor. That's how Liberia was in the Southeast. And I said to myself, there's something fundamentally wrong with this picture I'm seeing. I better leave this country. And that's part of the reason why I was motivated to leave Liberia. I saw that in my experience in the Southeast drove me out of Liberia, not the Civil War, drove me out of Liberia. So now let me make comment in few
They are
things.
closed Sano High School by then?
Huh?
They are closed down Sano High School by that time?
I think part of it, no teachers or all that stuff. I mean, not, it was just, there's a Catholic school that I think St. Joseph. All these schools were just up to 9th grade. They were only up to, they couldn't find competent teachers to teach in the high school. Okay. It was not a story just in Sino. It was a story in Grandeur. It was a story, this guy home or Putukan or whatever. It was still on the Grandeur. Now I understand it's on the River G. That was a story in the Southeast at the time. Just Harper was really, up there in education. So, but in this discussion, I think Carl and Mohamed mentioned about alumni contribution and what have you. I worked for the University of Liberia in various capacities. I was research assistant to Dr. Hassan Conte when you were VPA, the vice president for academic affairs. I was teaching assistant. And I went back as adjunct faculty. I've been in the life of the university. For me, I'm one of those, and I said it before, and I can say it again in this worldwide medium. I cannot contribute to the university, to the growth of the University of Liberia financially or materially. I cannot, because we have to do some. University of Liberia is a public university. Appointments of leaders who lead and who manage the higher institution of education is not based on competence, it's based on patronage and political loyalty. So retention of university president is not based on their performance, it's based on how loyal they are to the ruling class. That is for lack of time, I can't even give you more example. James Double Jala, the former director for PPCC, was on the Ebola team in Liberia. He shared his experience with me. He and I stood, we are both committed, both people who commit ourselves. We've been teaching at the university for years, from being just student teacher up to full-time teacher. He took the Fender campus, he took international donors who wanted to invest, and he made a case to them that the University of Liberia has the highest number of young people. They don't have safe running water in their bathroom, drinking water. So we're going to fight Ebola. Let's go to Fender, let's have a borehole and run water in all the, that will use solar, power to power all of the sanitation system to set up at the Fender campus. Do you know the university, there was no authority, even when they have mattresses for hospital. They had it in the warehouse. You went to the university, said, look, come. You have clinic on Fender campus. You can come and take even 200. You don't have 200 bags, but keep them. When some spoil, you have need to replace them. Dr. Wise was then vice president for administration. I think he carried his late picker. He took probably 10 and carried to Fender campus. When he sat and the donors were pressurizing him, he took a group to Fender campus and said, look, this is shameful. And he filled in the form, the application form for request. He gave it to LU administration and said, "You just sign." Do you know they refused to sign? They said they need to meet, and they were looking at him like he wants to take credit when he was trying to help because he's an alumni. He said, "I'm sitting now out there. I saw something good that LU need to benefit." Today, students can go in the bathroom and wash their hands. They can, all of the design they made.
Yeah, thank you.
Ask CRC to come and do that on Fender campus. They walk away from that. It is that school that I'm going to invest in. We have to find a way how to retain the university. Retention of university administration should be based on performance. I was working as a contractor for the World Bank. I did assessment for the graduate school to do all these things. I work with Dr. Tula and others. The former president, which
thank you, Mr. Gongloe.
when the World Bank said retain Gongloe so we can do this, she said no.
Thank
But
you.
it's not my passion. They said we don't want him. Where is our project today? So I mean, this is a school. We have to have a way how to retain the University of Liberia president. Other than that, I'm not interested in. I've given enough. I've given my knowledge. I've given.
Thank you, Mr. Gongloe. I got your point. Cole, I want you to respond to this, and not this is very important because sometimes when people watch this show, they don't understand what we're doing. Okay, Emmanuel Zaza say all those panelists on the show are educated people. How many of them have books out there that the school system can use to help strengthen the system? What the written recommendation that others can read from for better decision making? Until you start pointing fingers and get involved to help our country, no need to talk, please. So this writer believes that talking is not helping. Your response?
Clearly, the writer doesn't know anything about the panelists. So people just like to say things because you have carte blanche just to talk. You can just say stuff, and I'm not going to even talk about what I do. I volunteer a lot of my time and a lot of my money to projects, and I don't do it for praise. I don't do it for recognition. So I'm not going to get into that. And I'm sure every single person on this panel, including yourself, Dennis, takes resources away from the family, a lot of time away from the family. This very show is a voluntary process for us to share information. So I think, some of these people say these things just because they can, not because they're sincere or because they think, maybe they think everything's politically motivated. The sad part about our culture is becoming such a way that it's so toxic. Everyone wants to attack everyone. Everyone's so full of anger. Everyone's suspicious of everybody. And, we've got a problem. Liberia suffers from, I remember, I can't remember the statistic off my head, top of my head, but I quoted it on the show once because it was in front of me. But we have one of the highest incidents of brain drain in the world. So this is no country, if you rip the educated class out of a country, either because they were killed or they had to flee, and they leave the country and they establish themselves somewhere else, if that happened in the United States, if that happened in China, the entire country would collapse. So that's what we're seeing that's happened right now. Not that Liberia was perfect before, but Liberia was certainly better. I mean, in 1972, they had a massive teacher education campaign, and it was comprehensive in every county. Tuskegee Institute, the government borrowed technocrats from Tuskegee to go to Zozo, spent 2 years in Zozo training teachers on rotation. We had so many projects across the country building people up. People say, oh, they did this and only these kind of people could go to school. That's not true. That's not true. My father was educated. My mother is educated, and many, many other people. Mr. Gongloe's father was educated. Mr. Gongloe, is from a different generation than I am. And his father was educated. So we're talking about education was being proliferated throughout the country. And we were doing better. We weren't doing enough. But as a country, we're moving in the right direction. The war shifted that. Instead of it fixing the problems, it took all of these brilliant people out of the country. The second thing is a lot of the people who fled Liberia are traumatized. And a lot of them are devastated by experiences they had, the hatred they experienced. They don't want to look back. And the ones that do want to look back are dealt with suspicion and envy and all kinds of negative energy. Rwanda, Sierra Leone, all of these countries that went through war, South Sudan, what is first thing they do? Reach out to the diaspora. Y'all come home and help us, my children, my young people. Right now, the best and the brightest people in Liberia that have never left, the moment they get the opportunity to leave, they will leave. And countries that are looking for people to build their capacity are courting our best and brightest citizens. I look at people like Dr. Doe and others that are young, Amos 12, all of these bright minds that are not being utilized in Liberia. When push comes to shove, they will leave. And it will continue. Sam Toe just got his PhD. He was in Liberia. I hear he's in America now. He doesn't have to be there. He has a PhD. He can live a good life without looking back at Liberia. These are problems that need to be solved. Because as soon as we do build the capacity, because we're not educating properly, we're not acculturating citizens that are patriotic, they run away. They run away. I went to Liberia, the years I spent in Liberia. Kehleboe, ask your brother. If you ever ask him, say, tell me about Cole. Do you know how many times I had to go sit in Tawan Gongloe's office and literally cry? I was in my early 30s, and I would go in Tawan Gongloe's office and say, Counselor Gongloe, what the heck is going on? Why are people fighting someone who's trying to do the right thing? And he would just smile because he understands the people. I have experienced the greatest pushback and animosity from the very people who we are trying to work with.
Thank you.
We try to put a system in place, don't Steve? Who the one thing she is? She wants poor job here. The problem is so entrenched. Yeah. And it's because of the way we educate our people. It's the process. Education is not just literacy. It's teaching people how to conduct themselves, how to behave. Education teaches you right from wrong. And we've already broken down the traditional system that teaches right from wrong, and we haven't replaced it with anything. And I'm going to say one last thing, and I'll get off my soapbox. I just want to give one parable that my great-grandfather told my mother when she was young, when she was a young student. He said, you people, he said it in Mano, but the translation is, you people are neither stick nor rope.
Say Mano first.
He said, you people are neither stick nor rope. And in the interior times, sticks and ropes are useful things. They're useful tools if you're in the village. That's what you use to build. If you're not a stick, you're not a rope, you have no use, you have no value. You're not rooted in the traditional education system, and you're not exactly Western. You're in this kind of state of limbo. And that is the problem. That's the problem with the way the education system was constructed. So we have to revisit that. We have to be inclusive and incorporate the values that are going to lift our people out of this mentality. Low self-esteem is produced by miseducation, and low self-esteem leads to corruption, poor decision-making. It leads to ineptitude. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't love yourself, you will steal, you'll do bad things because you have no internal compass to stop you. You don't respect yourself enough to do the right thing. And that needs to change.
Thank you. And again, Emmanuel Zaza, Google this book, Foundational Words of Our Nation. Go on Amazon and you will see that and see who wrote it. Also,
tell them again.
Right. My pastor, my former teacher, English teacher at Monrovia College now, Dr. Patricia Wesley, tons of books. She has gone to the University of Liberia to offer to read her poems free of charge. She's been given no chance. I was in Liberia 2017. I went around the place so that they can use this civic book in the school. No way. Pastor Jeremiah Menyonga, my pastor from Lowell, Massachusetts, he wrote books and took them to his own English department at the university. Free, just use it. Nobody gave him a chance. So, Emmanuel, before you ask these questions, sometimes do a little bit of research. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we're going to read more of your comments. And if you want to join the discussion, please call 605-313-6004. The code is 791403. Do that and join. And then anything we say now will be on solutions. But before that, let's just take a short break and be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Panelists.
This from Florence Theo Akosa. Liberians don't like educated people. My father was a very good man who used to be a good lawyer and used to teach the University of Liberia, and they killed him because of that. Mountain Zian will say, you are so right, says Carl. I too can share my story. This person, Rakas, so what book have you written to change this narrative? And when you write the book, they will not buy it, they will not read it.
Liberia is not a reading society.
They like to read in the first place. Dr. Burroughs has written books. Plenty of Liberians will write books. We got a lot of authors out there.
A lot of them.
A lot of authors.
Professor K. Moses now is writing book almost every year. There's a new book that he's written.
Exactly.
Priscilla Kuya say, oh man, Mr. Kunney, I was just writing that you were sounding empathetic a little, but then you end up with trying to put our President Weah's statement again, talking about what you don't think he meant. Mr. Kunney, I see.
That's funny.
Toga Bayu, I believe those people who think they are more educated than the people in back home with mentality will find it very hard to win any government position like ANC. You see what we're talking about? This person went to, but Mr. Kunney, let me give you the time to respond first. This one from Bobby E. Wright. Great show tonight. So glad to see Mrs. Famula. I love her perspective. Mr. Kunney, you know, in my hometown, they say when when bamboo plow the mat, then you can put, the part of the rotten that is not good. So the person said you started good, but then you became PR. Your response?
No, man, I don't think you really need a response because look, it's part of the reason why we're here. We are here to discuss issues, and people have their views, they have their opinion, they have their interpretation. It is my interpretation of the president's statement. It is not a PR for him, but that's how I interpret it. That again, if we have so many educated people in Liberia, nobody can dispute that. I mean, especially if you talk about academic education, we have a lot in Liberia.
A lot of fake degrees too, fake credentials.
So if that was the problem that the country faces, then we have no problem. Our problem is not because we don't have education. Our problem, and this is my own extension, our problem is that we don't have people of character and integrity. So it's not an issue of education. We don't have people that have character. We don't have people that have integrity. People that don't have the kind of moral compass that we're talking about that will restrain you from doing certain things. That's what we don't have. But we have educated people. Liberia got a lot of educated people. So that's just my extension. It's not in defense of what the president said. I'm giving you my personal interpretation of how I understand this statement. So I'm not doing PR for the president. I'm giving you my own interpretation. And you have every right to your own interpretation.
Thank you. You see, Mr. Kunney with some fire there. Let's get callers on the line. The first one is Opa Ansu Dualo. What's your take, brother?
Hey, John, how you guys doing, man? It's always get inspired while I listen to Cole. It's an amazing thing. Cole, I want to let you know you are not the only person who will cry in Liberia. I cried so many times. There are times where you sit in the country, but I want to use the cynics word. Liberia's middle class already does this. You just have to bring them home. I'm not asking you. So we're not asking you to come to the country for government job. We have to consider that we are equal to Liberians. And our entire purpose is to elevate this country. How are we going to do that if you see us as opposition to our own country? You know, people have to understand, the more we talk, we only talk because we care about this location. But people see Liberians abroad as opposition. We are not opposition. Well, listen, the greatest minds that will transform our country is already prepared. We are everywhere. The goal here is to embrace us. You know, sometimes I hate to speak in Bata. You know, my mom would say, you know, say, Kumpoli, we ourselves have to back ourselves. Nobody else will come and back us. Blame the Americans, blame the Norwegians, blame whomever, until we firmly believe that we ourselves can change this and have the proper leadership. This kind of nonsense will continue to become the last thing almost everything. Love this show tonight, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Kunney, Priscilla is having a disclaimer here. He said, Mr. Kunney, don't mind Dennis here. He just wants to put you and my hair against each other. Priscilla said, I'm instigating it, but let me bring on Mr. Aliyu Samba Kamara. Aliyu, you are live. 1 minute, please.
No, why the other man talking? I gave 1 minute. So you said 1 minute.
No, because we have more colors. We have more colors now.
I'll try that, man. First of all, Lord, let me just say, Mr. Kunney, Wilmot Kunney, look, let me tell you, a lot of the time people seem to not understand the perspective from which Wilmot Kunney speaks. But usually, if you subtract the Goyah factor, Mr. Kunney is always on point. You see people say, oh, because of my own brother, you know, I like to deal with my own kinsman first. Mohamed is one of the trouble on the show. The way he speaks bluntly sometimes can make the people feel disrespected sometimes. When you just stand there and say they're voting, the people that can vote because they lack of knowledge and lack of education. Then you're the same people on the platform say hundreds of Liberians are writing books. Mr. Kunney say education is not the problem because there are a lot of educated people. Then again, you don't want to disagree. So the whole thing is confusing. But let me just lay this out here. The problem is usually people leave authority and come in the diaspora. They are usually the ones who are talking about the educated people are overseas, they're not in the country, they travel. Let me tell you, before Samedoki, we had the progressive who were fighting. When the kings, Samedoki gave them power to write constitution. What did they do? They alienated diaspora Liberian. Then we move on to the Chancellor Kampa, Ellen King. A lot of the people in overseas who are talking about, the ostracized, the alienated, the see as enemy, they were in Liberia. Dualu were doing business in Liberia. I saw some Dualu told them he in Liberia. They were all there. The issue of dual citizenship under every government was never passed. Okay, the own government moved from there. Then John, we are on the government king. John, we are on the government doing the same thing. And guess who's doing these things? They are the very people who went to the different universities and the different colleges. So let us agree with Mr. Kunney here because he actually won this conversation, even though usually people can just kick your opinion out the door. Well, he's on point. If you just take the judge we have factor, Mr. Kunney is usually on point on this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Aliyu. And Mr. Aliyu also is a GNB supporter. We want to mention that.
Yeah, right.
Let's go to Elvis Morris. Elvis, you are live.
Thank you so much, Mr. John. Quickly, I just want to say thank you guys again tonight for this conversation. I like the fact that you diversify your topics. It's not all about politics. And this is very, very good. Quickly, I want to say I'm really looking forward to hearing the solutions from your panelists.
Yeah, we're coming.
We all can diagnose the problems, but we all want to hear some concrete solutions that may help. For me, quickly, I just want to say, like I said earlier, it's the funding for me, where we don't have enough money, we don't have enough funding. to effectively and efficiently fund the programs for education. And I just want to ask, I guess your guests will probably know, do we have a teachers college in Liberia? And
yes.
Is there a way to entice more university students to go into the field of teaching? Because I hardly see any teachers who are actually college graduates who went to school specifically for teaching. You know, in America, people go to school and they go to school to become teachers.
Yeah, Evans, we do have teachers college at the University of Liberia. We also have the KRTTR, that's the Kakata Rural Teachers Training Institute. We have the Zaza, and we have Webo, who is also a teachers training institute. Let's hear from G. Flomo. Mr. Flomo, you are live.
Thank you, Brother Dennis. Thank you very much. And I'm Kehleboe Flomo, and
Kehleboe.
Before I go further, that the issue that was raised for which Mr. Kunney responded, I think I consider his first response that he could not comment on that. But when I saw him diving, I became a bit disappointed because you are defending the indefensible. The president made a statement. Words matters. We are not even talking about those who we consider to be educated people today, but what to be the president's own statement or action is about motivating the youth to take heed and go into education. But if you sit there and tell me that his statement was because we have thousands of educated people and there is nothing being realized, I mean, I'm highly disappointed before I go further. Thank you very much, President. The reason why I come on this show is because everyone I see there, even if I disagree with you, I respect the views and the platform of everyone. I think in education, since I graduated high school, prior to my graduation, I worked for an institution in Liberia, and after I graduated, I went into teaching. I served from the classroom, going as far as becoming a vice principal for a school. So that's how much it is. And one of the things I always told my students was the only thing that can depart from you, that you will take it along with you in the grave, is the knowledge that you get and the education that you're going to get from that knowledge. I was a motivator of students. Even at present, I always told people, the only thing that you can get, as much as we find ourselves, in the diaspora, the best you can do for yourself is to educate yourself. I always motivate people. I will not go tell you, because X1 went and he was not successful, or he did it and he never put on anything, so it means education is this. No. My business is
thank you, Mr. Flomo.
Are you cutting me off?
No, I want you to wrap up. We have more callers here, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
And so, for what I see in the educational sector in Liberia, is a failure of systems. And one of the speakers spoke about it as Brother Sherif or Sherif, one of them. He spoke about it. The failure in the system is what's getting Liberia today. And we are not even noticing what is happening. And by and large, most of that is contributing to the leadership.
Yeah.
Not the president by himself. All of the guys you have in government are not who are working education. They got the education right in Liberia. But they are sitting there and looking at the system moving back without doing anything.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I have a short time, but I mean, this is a serious issue, and I'm happy, that I can come on this platform to listen to the speakers and to, give my own view. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let Mr. Emmanuel Zaza. Emmanuel, you are live. Go ahead, please. Question or comment?
Yes, Mr. John, so sorry, I don't want to talk about my background directly, but because of the way my question was treated, that's why I decided to talk. I think my question was treated with sentiment. I don't think you treated me well. I actually asked a question whether we have those speakers as our panelists, because most of you are saying good things. You will not be around forever. You will not be in a position to go out and abroad maybe some days to come. Why, if you have a government that is well about education, all these ideas that you have them on paper, they can be used for next generation.
Okay.
So I'm not attacking you, but you just have to discuss it. Whether we can do research, whether we can read, I think you should keep us like that, please. That's what I thought. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Understood. Let's get our last caller here. Oliver. Oliver, you're live. Go ahead, please.
Hello, family. Thank you so much for having me. I'm your biggest fan, Mr. Kunney. I'm your best fan. Mr. God and Mr. Sherif. Thank you for having me. Yes, you guys were talking about the education and writing a book, and people are refusing to, the university are refusing to have most of the brothers and sisters who writing a book that need to be educated. Need to educate brothers and sisters that have been refusing for the people to allow it to be this school. And when you say it's that. But what I think, and what I think was this Sherif, he said, Liberia are not reader. I don't know which one said it, but I didn't know. But I think so. Sherif said Liberia are not the reader. So I was thinking that I can put my father on there and maybe we can do the audio book. And do the audio book and send it out to everybody.
Yeah.
They're gonna read it. They can put it in the ear and listen.
Yeah.
And secondly, my thought about how Liberia how we can help to develop Liberia, like you guys are saying. Why not everyone who complaining about Liberia cannot be better? What can we just make it easy for everyone else to say, let me go and make Liberia my Liberia? And go there and develop it when you want your Liberia to look like your community. If you start doing that, thing, it's going to be a lot of competition.
Thank you.
We, as a brother, saying that, some of us are complaining and saying that Liberia is doing this, the government doing this, but then leave the government out of it, you look at thing out of there. Go and develop that community and you live and make it Liberia. And make it your Liberia. I think that's the best way we can have that competition.
That's a good point.
And that's my point.
Thank you. That's a good one. All right. So let me come back to my panelists. Our last caller here say, what can we do? So let's look at solutions. And time is fast spent. Let me give each of you, starting with Mr. Sherif, 2 minutes. How can we fix this system that we so eloquently described? I know it's going to take days to talk about solutions, but let's do our best.
We can take a holistic approach so that all of us together, the government, ourselves, who are not in government, can be a part of the solution. One of the things that, I'm thinking about is that to go back to WAPLO Institute and provide something, right? And I've been in that process. Dennis, you are aware for some time now, for about a year now. So in concrete terms, I'm trying to get to WAPLO Institute to see what it is that I need to do there. I've contacted someone in Monrovia to give me some updates on what is the present need there now. This is a public school, mind you, but I'm not sitting around saying, well, I don't care, I need George Weah to do something first. Because you know what? George Weah is not going to do anything, or he's not going to do much. So it falls on me now and those who came out of that school to go back and do something. Maybe, after that, the government may come in. They may or may not come in. If they come in, fine. If they don't, fine. We can still go ahead as ordinary citizens to do what we need to do. Right? And that's one approach. The other thing is we should continue to use this platform, other platforms, to call on government to do the right thing. Because I don't think the government is doing the right thing. The government has not prioritized education. And I don't care what supporters of the government feels and thinks about this. This is the truth. This government has not prioritized education. They don't care. And part of it borders on incompetence. So education is degraded. Education is not prioritized. And this government's priority is not aligned with, the growth of the nation or expectations of growth of the nation out of poverty, out of degradation. So that is one of the responsibilities that we have to take seriously, that I take seriously. And I think when you combine all of those things, plus our decision making, one of the things that Ali talked about, yes, I did say that if people are not enlightening, it is likely that they don't make good decisions. it is very likely that they don't make good decisions. And I think some of the things that we're going through in Liberia now is because the people are in darkness. People are in darkness. And I think, as Gongloe mentioned, it looks like the government wants it that way. I don't totally agree with that. But I mean, you can't help but to think, what is the reason why that they're not going to invest in education? These guys are not stupid. What is the reason why they're not going to prioritize education? So I think that, as I mentioned earlier, the passport out of poverty is education. Education today, education tomorrow, education forever. So that's what needs to be the priority. There was a president who not only sat in the executive mansion, he went around the country. So lastly, and I'm going to be brief, you said that there are schools in Sino, Dennis, that, that school students, children don't want to go to. Well, the government has to make it a priority. There was a time in Liberia where certain communities didn't want to send their kids, were reluctant to send their kids to school. The president prioritized. The president spoke directly to those communities, people in those communities, to send their kids to school. And it yielded some results. So it's a long-term effort. If you have, through that effort, if 10 people went to school, the following year, if 20 kids went to school, it's a gradual process. So until that happens, we're going to have what we have now or worse.
Thank you. Cole, let me go to you. Let's talk about solutions.
Okay. Am I off mute?
Yeah, audible now.
So the solution is already, we know the goal, and the solution is actually already laid out. So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put together a think tank that involves experts, national experts. I don't like the fact that we over rely on the international community. We have our own experts, government and private sector, collaborative expert to get together and do a roadmap to solve the problem. In the meantime, while that is happening, you have quick impact projects that you can, put together. I always like to say we have to save people who can be saved, right? So the early childhood education should be prioritized. Making sure that in elementary schools that they have a meal before they start the day. We need to try to look for funding and resources to make sure that every child, elementary school age, is fed a wholesome meal, not just given a bunch of starch, but given a wholesome meal, maybe even vitamins, worm medicine, just basic health treatment, so that they don't end up with poverty-related impairments. Because if children are not properly nourished, if children are not properly fed, if they have parasites, it doesn't only stunt their physical growth, it stunts their intellectual growth. So a lot of people have permanent, irreversible physical growth impairment and intellectual growth impairment due to not having enough to eat as their brains and bodies are trying to develop in early childhood. So you cannot educate someone who is not healthy. So we need to, that's a quick impact and urgent emergency situation that needs to be addressed today. And that is something that we can look for. All the so-called donor funding that's going to do all kinds of other things, those are some of the most important things. If our citizens are stunted, if they die before they get a chance to live, the government has failed the country. It is the responsibility of the government to make sure that people are safe, and that is one of the best things. So early childhood education is a great quick impact project. Make sure that they eat. Make sure that they're going to school in very safe environments. Put in manners, put in good behavior, ethics in early childhood education. Start teaching kids right from wrong. The other thing is the think tank that is put together to do the long, medium, and long-term projects needs to be an array of experts, mostly educators, but you need other experts. You need public policy people, because public policy people know the purpose of government and how to coordinate government's responsibility with citizens' rights. You need to have on there former educators, meaning teachers, principals, school leaders. You need to have on there some traditional people. On that think tank, they're going to have to decide what kind of curriculum, what are we going to do as far as redesign the curriculum? Absolutely. K through 12 needs to be completely reassessed, redesigned. And there needs to be some nationalization and uniformity requirements that every school, public or private, have. That needs to be updated. This stuff hasn't been changed since the 1960s. And those things were brought into place and put into place by foreigners. So we need to figure out what we need. So that kind of think tank has to be done today. It's past due. It should have been done in 2006, you know, when a civilian government took over. So we need to make sure, I'm sorry, a democratically elected government took over. We need to make sure that we get these things done. And that think tank shouldn't just be, oh, we're going to bring this other person because they're in the political party or they want them a schoolmate. We need to actually have a intentional and deliberate effort to recruit the best and the brightest. Liberian citizens need to know that they have to be able to volunteer sometimes also. Everything that you do for your country should not be about compensation. We have to understand that volunteering is also a civic duty and responsibility. Not everything you do, you should be paid for. Not everything you do, you should receive some kind of, you know, you should get ties, you get this, you should get all, it's not a patriotic way to look at things. I'm not saying in events where you're selling something to the government shouldn't pay you. But if you cannot take a little bit of time out of your day to participate on a voluntary basis to help structure your country's future, because you have the capacity, you've been trained to do so. The same way we're on this platform utilizing technology, Zoom can be utilized. Liberians sitting in New York, in London, in Ghana, in South Africa, in Monrovia can be on that tank, and they can think on their days off, if it's a Saturday, whatever. We have to act, and we have to do it now. So the solutions are not running from us. We know what we need to do. It's just a matter of having that authority to coordinate it so it can get done.
Thank you. Mr. Gongloe.
All right. Wow, Call spoke for 9 minutes. I'm going to speak for 9 minutes.
Call spoke for 6 minutes.
All right. So, look, the solution to our problem, I wouldn't even go around. It's sitting right in the closet, on our computer, on our desktop, under President Turnbull. Like Sherif talked about, the Primary Education Act was written. If you're looking at Primary Education Act, it's very clear on how education should be managed. I mean, everything is laid out. That Primary Education Act, which was enacted into law by the legislature and later revised under the late Joseph Cotto, you know, they revised our Education Act. It requires the government, the national budget, 25% of the national budget. If you get 1 million national budget, 25% of that should be invested in education for the education of Liberian children. But no government beyond Tobo has respected that, including President Salih. No government. They say, hey, that's the art, but we have all our national priorities. So the solution to that, I will look at it in two ways. There are many ways we can look at it, but I will encapsulate it into two expressions. Accountability, okay, or maybe let me reverse it. Investment and accountability. Government should invest in education, but then require accountability from school administrators as well as students. We no longer have summer schools. We no longer give NTR to students. Students can repeat, but because of the abridged curriculum in school year now running in Liberia, they don't even have summer school. Students don't see themselves going to summer school. Like, okay, you have some deficiency, you have to go to school for a month or two to clear that deficiency. We no longer have that because it will require government to pay teachers to do that. They scrap that out. No accountability. So they just pass students, some kind of way. So, for example, at the University of Liberia, where in this country, when you teach, students evaluate you. That evaluation report goes to the Department of Research and is analyzed and sent to your department on what students said about you. You have faculty, your colleagues evaluate your performance. We need to introduce that in Liberia. In elementary school, in middle school, and in high school. We need to introduce that. That's accountability. So government invests in, government requires school administrators to also be accountable how they manage, how they take care of the students, how they teach students. We need to introduce that. For example, we talk about donor funding across our sector, Ministry of Health and Education. If our health sector is the sector that received the largest attraction from donors. But guess what? The doctors who have been leading the Ministry of Health are very educated, very competent in their field, but they lack management skill. They lack national patriotism. They lack the competence to face donors. These donors, around 2016, 2015, 2016, there was a study done. WHO actually assigned a technical team. If I was going to be on that team, but they told me I could not do two consultancy. I could not do a contractor for World Bank and be contractor for WHO because I actually got an offer and I said I can do both. They said no, that would be double dipping. But the study came out that in Liberia, while the Ministry of Health was looking for money, the health sector from international sources, donor sources, they had $352 million sitting in the country in donors' accounts, because we allow donors to come to the country and say this is what our project will fund. And many of them are aware, but they lack the patriotic spirit to stand up, because there is international conference I call on transparency in donor funding. You have the Paris conference, then you have the Accra clarification that donor funding must be aligned to national interests, national program. Donors should not come to your country and say, I'm going to dig well in Zolowi. No. If digging well in Zolowi is not the national priority of the government, that donor should realign the funding to meet national priority. Our ministers don't do that. They say, oh, that's the people money. In fact, okay, yeah, we need this. Yep, give the minister.
And so what is needed for them to do that? Patriotism, or what is it? Why they don't do it, and what do we need for them to do it?
Dennis, really, I wish I could speak for this minister, really. Because, some of the ministers are the brightest in terms of academic performance. They are the brightest. But when it comes to public service, my short time in public service in Liberia, my experience showed that a very smart minister in classroom, as soon as they become minister, the first thing that comes out of my mouth, we need consultant to do this. When they themselves can even write that, they now find it difficult to write, to take pen and paper or sit behind the computer desk to write that. And it's, for me, a mystery in public service in Liberia. Why do we go for expatriate or knowledge so much in Liberia to solve our problem than making use of our own domestic homegrown knowledge? And we have a lot of that. That's one thing. So I would say investment and accountability. Government should invest in education, but then hold school administrators to be accountable. And I would end on this note. The only person that has proven that can do that or has the capacity to do that, when you say to do it, for me, fortunately, it's my own brother, Councillor Gongloe. If you give him a chance to become president in 2023, all these things we talk about, lack of accountability, holding our public official accountable, it will straighten up that country. I will end on that note.
Thank you. Mr. Kunney, I saw a grin on your face when Kehleboe was making that pitch. Go ahead. What's your solution?
No, part of the benefit of speaking last is that you listen to everybody and they kind of like, do the bulk of the work for you. listening to my fellow panelists, almost everything they offer is in the direction of the solutions to the problem. So I'm not really going to repeat some of the things that were said. But, you know, I remember, I think it was 1982 at the University of Liberia. My social science teacher told me that, I mean, not me personally, but before the class, he stood before the class. We were probably like 50 in our class. He said, college education is not for everybody. I see a lot of you in this class. Some of you could be very good carpenters, but you're going to waste your 4 years here trying to get a college education when you could be a very good carpenter within the 4 years. A professional carpenter, a renowned carpenter. I'm saying that to say that from my angle, part of the way to move forward to solve our problem, first of all, we have to close that floodgate of college graduates that we put out every year without skill. People that graduate from the university, various universities, that can't do anything. So basically, I'm saying we have to set up a system of vocational and technical education in our country. And maybe we can get it from the technical, article, the expert panel that Cisco talked about, maybe from a conference. You know, how do we invest in vocational and technical education for people who lost almost 14 to 15 years of real school? They really have no real solid foundation to continue a real academic program. You know, the state of South Carolina is one of the states that is heavy on technical education. You know, what is wrong with the 2 years program, you know, to train people in agriculture, to train people in carpentry, to train people, you know, give people skill so that when they leave school, they got something to go out there to hustle. Then part of the solution I see is that for me now, the generation, you know, the adult generation, it looked like they already gone. But let us go to the early childhood education. I'm thinking, what would the Liberian child of today, what would that child be, you know, 15, 16, 20 years from now? Will they be like the other people today who can really spell? So the investment should be in that early education to make sure that the nation is training up a new breed of citizens that will now follow the footsteps of where the current failures are. So if you ask me in terms of solution, let's invest in early education, early childhood education, and let's invest more in technical and vocational education. And we can put all of the components that the other panelists talk about here, funding, accountability, all of these things are all part of that mix. But I'm concerned with the future of the Liberian child who is 5 years old today, 6 years old today. You know, what would their educational outlook be, you know, 15 years from now? Will we still be talking about, you know, a child, somebody who is a child today that becomes an adult and cannot distinguish between the beta ball and football spelling and spell all of them the same way, spell code and code, you know, spell everything the same way? So the investment in the younger people of today so that we can have better educated group of Liberians that will steer the shape of the nation tomorrow, that is my concern. The present generation of people today that we have, let us put emphasis on technical and vocational schools. Those who are really talented that can go to 4-year degree colleges, let improve the 4-year degree colleges so that they don't just become kind of graduate type of schools, but schools that really, you know, provide real higher level of education. I think that would be my solution.
Thank you. Lawrence Fallacy, great initiative. IB Tyler, what is the solution for sex for grace? This is a criminal act, by the way.
Accountability.
Accountability.
Samuel Cole, Dr. Shafi of the chemistry department used to call it committing academic suicide. I think when Mr. Kunney, when you were talking, Dr. Edison Pajibo, impunity and impurity are the key two variables that I advised the government against in 2018 during the education summit in Kakata. And one more. And Dr. Abdullah Dukle wrote, he said, when the children of policymakers and national leaders do not go to school in the country, no serious investment will ever be made in education. Same for health. At this time, no matter how good the discussion is, there is Tabata going on somewhere. So at this time, we're going to turn our attention to the Tabata of the week. And I always like to introduce that by the song by our friend who say, I don't need your Tabata.
It's too late, baby, go to bed. I don't need your Tabata. Baby, oh, your Tabata. I'm gonna go away, your Tabata. My baby, oh, I don't need your Tabata. My baby, oh, baby, I'm tired.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. If you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. We are discussing how can we move our country, Liberia, forward using education. We started with education. In the weeks to come, we're going to touch on other sectors that we believe can be used to move the education forward. This night, we're going to start our Tabata session with Mr. Sherif. Mr. Sherif, what's the Tabata of the week? You are muted, sir.
It's regional in scope in the West African region. So last week, two members of the Guinean opposition called on the military to speed up the transition process. And they said, in fact, they're going to, they raised the specter of, bringing charges against the military for some of the killings that went on during the Alpha Conde administration. Why is that? Why is that Tabata for me? Because these two guys are direct beneficiaries of the military coup that occurred. But recently, the military has gone on an anti-corruption drive. So they're taking ill-begotten properties from these people that got these properties through corrupt means. So two of the individuals who lost their properties are former prime ministers. So they went in, took the properties away from them. So now the government have confiscated their properties. So all of a sudden, these gentlemen have turned from supporters of the military administration to now anti. So my thing is, when they affect them directly, they become opposition. If it doesn't affect you, you are a government supporter. Until something affects you, then you become opposition. It's just foolishness.
Call what's your Tabata of the week?
God, there's just so many of them. I think, so my Tabata is the exchange between our colonial ambassador and the Lord Mayor. I mean, this is pure comedy and buffoonery. Talk about diplomatic faux pas. First of all, these are things that the citizens have been saying in Liberia. The condescendence, the disrespect. We've been saying these things to our lawmakers, to our president, to our mayor. I mean, you don't even need to go far. Look at newspaper publications. Look at the citizens writing on social media, on Twitter, tweeting pictures of the trash. They're complaining on Facebook. So this man coming out, looking like Eli Ayers or something. Like he's talking to a bunch of half-liberated captives, that are sitting in some colony that they're gonna, exploit for resources. Standing up and telling us what we already have been saying as citizens to our leaders, I think was just absurd, stupid, disrespectful, and the tone and the manner in which you did it had absolutely nothing to do with the merit of what he was saying, because we're already saying these things. So I want to be clear that the Tabata isn't whether or not what he said is true. It is the fact that he felt the need to say something that we are already saying as if we don't know and we haven't already said it. There's a huge difference. And as a diplomat, that's not your place. That's not your place of conduct. The other thing is, it's not his money. You know, Liberians like to say, oh, you know, the Liberian people care. Oh, the people giving us money so they can cuss us. They can disrespect us as if it's not some kind of reciprocal relationship. You know, these donors don't give things for free. They get a lot back more than what they even give. So that's the tabata is that, and then the mayor responding instead of the foreign minister responding was the icing on the cake of incompetence.
Thank you.
The icing of the tabata cake. So I will leave it there.
I was going to Mr. Kunney, but he's laughing too hard, so let me go to Mr. Gongloe.
Now, come making me to laugh. I'm not supposed to.
Kunney can be the last all of the time.
Okay. Let my brother be the last.
It can be a Southeastern or solidarity.
Go ahead, Mr. Kunney.
Okay. My tabata for the week. Oh, I got so many tabata, but I'm restricted to one. First of all, I want to really say a big thank you to FOL for appreciating me for my 28th wedding anniversary. I was celebrated last week, Thursday. And guess what? The tabata for the week is Ade Tabata. I'm the tabata. And I just want to appreciate my wife, Agnes Tape Kunney, for putting up with this tabata for 28 years. And sometimes it feels so good that despite all your tabata, there is somebody still there standing behind you.
Yeah.
So this week, I had a tabata.
Thank you, Agnes, for putting up with Mr. Kunney.
Thank you for not strangling our brothers.
Mr. Gongloe, your tabata of the week.
Well, I don't even know what to say as my tabata.
I know you were buying time when you said
that. No. No, I was not buying time. I told of the Ukraine war. Then I said, well, I don't want to be dismissed from school. Maybe if I say something. But here's what I would say is my tabata. I will still go back to the Ukraine thing because I see it kind of compelling. When I read and I watch what is going on social media, when I watch a video footage of black people who look like me, are treated in Ukraine, along the Polish border in Hungary. And even when I look back on how some of our brothers who went to school in Russia before, their stories, how Russians treated them. So between Russia and Ukraine, you probably have the collection of more racists or many people who don't like people who look like me. So these people decide to fight and kill each other. And you see some Liberians and government officials putting Ukraine flag as their profile on social media. But on a daily basis, there are cases in West Point, in Nikutan, in Gantor, in Sekrepi, that are dying and going without food. Hospitals are going without doctors or medicine. Pregnant women are dying. I listened to a science story just 4 days ago where a doctor said he has to leave the clinic because 2 pregnant women had died because he didn't have the medication, that he could have saved their life. And there were more, and he said he just had to go because he had no tools to work with. He told the midwife and others to handle. So this is our reality. This is the death of people on a daily, on a minute, hourly basis in Liberia. And we don't put the picture of these people on our profile. But we put Ukraine flag as our profile. People who don't like people who look like us. We in solidarity with them on social media, but we're not in solidarity with poor people. Our citizens, our brothers and sisters who are dying on a daily basis. For me, it's a total nonsense.
Thank you. And for this week, I don't have a tabata. What I have here is appreciation someone I was talking, we have introduced the Liberia History channel. And in fact, this Saturday at 7, we're going to have the Liberian History channel, why and how the Republic was established. We're going to be dealing with that. Also on Sunday, we're going to have the FOL Justice Forum, and we're going to be discussing the Courts of Liberia, Part 1, Civil and Criminal Court. So the reaction I have for these two shows showed me that, tells me that first, on the history, that we as Liberians, we have not done very well studying our own history. So almost everything that is coming out of this show is a shock to many. And I really, really am enjoying the way Liberians are happy about this show, and they are calling on us to even do it more frequently. Also, for the Justice Forum, for the first time, people are saying legal issues being discussed, on a show at a very basic level for everyone to understand. And so this is, again, a shock for many that are, oh my God, I didn't know this. And so as people are calling and are commenting, say, oh, continue on this, do it every day. We at FOL feel so happy that we are doing this. So for me, it's not a tabata. It is something that is very impressive, that where the government or where things have not been very well done, FOL is trying to at least play its 1% role. So watch us Saturday night for the Liberian History channel. You watch us Friday afternoon. We're going to have transitional justice here. Is peace possible for Liberia? Can we have peace? Someone asked me, say, the way of people in Nimba, most people in Nimba are worshiping Prince Johnson, and he's the kingmaker. Wherever he points his finger, a lot of people go there. In Grand Judah, George Bulley is the king. In fact, people that hurt other people, like President Doe, they are erecting his monument. With people gravitating towards their own hero, can we ever have peace? And so I say, I'm going to talk to the transitional justice folks. Then next week, we're going to talk about revenue generation and job creation in the mining sector, the case of Asala Metal. You don't want to miss this exciting show on Focus on Liberia. Thank you so much, my panelists, for coming tonight. Let's go around the room for 49 seconds each so that we can get our closing comment.
Sure, Sherif,
let me start with Mr. Kunney.
Well, the issue that was discussed today, for me, I think is a very serious issue. No country can make progress anyway in terms of development without education. And my hope is that some of the issues that were raised here, some of the solutions that were provided, it is my hope that somebody is having a listening ear somewhere so that we can begin this kind of national dialogue. It is incumbent upon us as Liberians to continuously raise issues that benefit all of us. And every issue don't have to be a partisan issue. If, our country make progress in education, we will all be proud of our country. And if the country is not doing well, we will all be affected by the country not doing well. So I just hope that policymakers, parents, other Liberians, they will listen to this and they will make their own contributions and make their own suggestions as to how we cross this hurdle, this national hurdle.
Thank you. Our audience, they have their own tabata. I don't want to miss that tonight. Kehleboe Flomo said, my tabata for the week is the graduation of Mr. Jefferson Koji from the University of Liberia. Sometimes we don't question the time.
Yeah, man.
Francis C. Wilson, thank you, Mr. Gongloe, for our mutual tabata. Anthony C. I'm suspending my tabata for my PIN. My PIN is my presidential candidate. Say she is not running. And that is too bad and painful for me. I'm the only Liberian without a candidate. Mr. C. Who is your candidate?
Anthony C. Come what to think Gongloe, man.
All right. And call. Closing comments, 49 minutes, 49 seconds.
49 seconds. We have a number of existing universities, existing technical colleges all over the country. We've got University of Liberia, William Tubman University, we've got Community College in Lofa, Nimba, Bassa, Maryland. There's community and technical colleges. We still have the Booker Washington Institute. Do something. If the administrations of these schools don't want to work, all of these schools have student organizations that should be doing something other than politics. Reach out to these student organizations and say, look, forget about politics. Once a month, we're going to do a seminar with different professionals. We're going to talk and pass knowledge. We're going to draw people from various, locations, and we're going to do a Zoom conference, organize a projector or something like that. And those are the kind of quick things happening so that, we can do. Citizens. It doesn't have to be government all the time. Do something. The second and last thing I'm going to say is the responsibility and duty of an activist is to be informed. You yourself have to be informed before you can inform others. So you should stop saying this thing has not existed since 1822. That is the clear sign that someone is not informed about our history and where we've been. And knowing where we've been and what has been accomplished in Liberia will give us the confidence to do even more.
Thank you. Mr. Sherif.
Yes. So Gongloe set the 49-second clock. I'll beat the 49-second clock, right? So so Dennis, teaching now is where I hear this a lot, where teachers will say, I'm just hanging in here till I get something, right? It's not enticing. So the remuneration is not enough. There should be enough. Teachers should be well paid. They should be well paid based on qualification, based on experience, based on results. Dennis, I remember, and speaking of sacrifice, you were in Guinea. You were one of the best teachers there, math teacher.
Yeah.
So you served. So all these people that are asking, they should ask some of us that know what you've done. I was part of the Liberian Student Committee in Guinea that helped created refugee schools in the forest region. So we pay our dues. I didn't just stop there. I also was able to do some after school program for students, some students in this refugee school, teaching them, communication, how to write. Because, with the student committee, I organized a newsletter. So we used to publish a monthly newsletter. And so because of the environment that we were in, because of the fact that I understand there was a lot going on, there was a lot of missing parts, right? So I had to do my part, the little that I could do at the time. So that's all we can do. That's all we could do at the time. So over here, we're doing the same thing. Just being on this platform alone is a contribution to our country.
Thank you.
And we're not stopping there. I've never stopped here. I mean, there are things that I'm doing on the ground at this time that there's no need to boast about what you've done. I've given out this scholarship, and that scholarship, this and that and the other. So when we come on this show and say that the government is not doing enough, it's based on, a sincere assessment of what we want to see Liberia going forward.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Sherif, for that recognition. Yes, I was teaching in Guinea. Mr. Gongloe, before I come to you, there are a few comments here I wanted. Priscilla again, who said I was trying to push your fire, said, but did Mohamed make his final comment before Tabata? Mohamed, you did, right?
Yes.
So Priscilla is starting another trouble, and then she's going to... Hamilton Zilli says, so many so-called education policy makers are not education practitioners themselves, yet they are the ones who are driving our educational sector. They are educators who are driven by passion and service to the nation. Right. And they are self-made educators who are driven by self-enrichment. I also see IB is trying to, our health contributor is trying to push a little line here. He said, please watch IB Tyler's Healthy Living page for my health contribution to our people. Please like and follow.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
Yeah, it's good.
Do that. And again, I want to say thank you, but then let's have Mr. Kehleboe Gongloe to have the last word.
All right, thank you. This has been a very fascinating discussion. I'm happy to share the platform with these brilliant and experienced talk show panelists. But on the main issue we discussed tonight, I would say my parting comment would be, let's respect the Education Act. The Education Act is very clear on the responsibility of national government to the children of Liberia. It spells out how much government should invest in education. It talks even about accountability on the part of school administrators. I think we should all advocate for that. If the government, the government of today, the government of tomorrow, becomes a respecter of the law, I think we do well. And the other piece I'd like to add to that is we have a growing population. There are different ways people look at the statistics, but more than 50% of Liberia population is a youthful population. If we have a youthful population, if you look at the current enrollment statistics for Liberia, that's just about 718,000 students. 49.5% female, 50.5% male. It shows to you that there are a lot more young people out there that are not in school. And I'm looking at the report that shows that Ebola affected enrollment, COVID affected enrollment, and many of the kids who dropped out of school, parents who got affected, and the kids have not returned to school. The government should actually become an activist to motivate parents to have their kids go to school. Because if we don't do this, if we lose, like Mr. Kunney said, if we lose on the young kids of today, we are actually losing on the future of Liberia. We should actually declare education emergency today, that if it requires even the legislature to pass a short-term measure to require every child, every parent to send their child to school, accompanying government massive investment in education, I think we should do that, because we're losing Liberia's future. I mean, in the midst of all these post-war challenges, drug use, and draining economy in the different communities, if we lose on our case, that would be a devastating blow on the future of Liberia. In fact, that would be, in my judgment, laying another basis for war. Because kids who are living outside Liberia, whose parents are living outside Liberia and training them, they will return to the country. And these kids who are not having access to education today will be their peers, and they will be competing over access to jobs, access to employment opportunity, whether it's private or in public sector. It will be another basis for contention, a national crisis. And I think we can prevent that by investing massively in education today. I will call on President, we have to actually declare education emergency throughout the country.
Yeah, thank you. And before you go, I don't want to let this go, because this is for you, Mr. Gongloe. James and Jensen say, Gongloe, it is unfortunate. Do you want Liberia and Liberians to act like they are living in utopia? No human being deserves to die, no matter which part of the world they are from. I think he's making reference to your Tabata.
Well, Jensen is entitled to that, but I just feel I'm not Christian on this one. If you don't love me, I don't love
you. Thank you.
You don't like me, I'm blind. I've talked to a Liberian who said in things that were happening in the United States way back, it's still happening in Ukraine. They sit on bus, transport bus, they're going to class, and one Ukrainian white, they are white people, they will enter the bus and spit at them. And they will sit down, they don't talk. You want me to love people like that? I can do that.
Thank you. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to that, but thank you so much.
I'm sorry. I don't love people who don't love
me. Thank you. So you don't show the other cheek.
No. That was in the Old Testament.
Thank you so much for coming tonight, and we're talking about education. We have reached out to the Deputy Minister for Instruction at the Ministry of Education, Mr. Alexander Duopu, and he has assured us that he's going to come here so that we could just chat about education. Most of the time, government officials would think that it's a criticism, but all we want here, and Mr. Duopu has accepted, is for us to talk what's going on with our educational system, and how can we help? What are your successes, the challenges, and how can we help to move our country forward when it comes to education? Again, I can't thank you enough for coming. I want to thank our viewers who are watching now and who will watch later, those who call in. Thank you so much for always being here. Until then, on behalf of the crew, we'll end with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Good night and God bless.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our